Hello, and welcome to our first fully audio newsletter. This is the third of our set of newsletters, which we'll be sending out. We're trying to find the format that best fits people that listen to audiobooks coming from a narrator. We've tried having embedded audio, and this month we'd like to try a fully audio newsletter. There will be a couple of links below for some things that I mention. But other than that, this is the newsletter in audio. So welcome. At the end, I'll ask for feedback. If there's anything anyone likes or dislikes about this format, please let us know, because I can't really find any narrators doing newsletters, let alone audio newsletters. You'll notice by the way I'm speaking, of course, as well, that this is just me. I have a couple of notes that I'm going to use to try to keep myself on track. But rather than script the newsletter, I thought I'd try freestyling it as much as possible. I've got a little list that I'll use to guide me. But other than that, this is just me talking to you this month, letting you know what's been going on. So welcome. The first two newsletters, we had a small piece of featured writing. The first one I chose. The second one was chosen by a newsletter subscriber. If in the future anybody has anything that they would like me to read in this section of the newsletter, please do let me know. Happy I can read anything that isn't copyright or that we have permission of the author to read out. For example, if you have a favourite Shakespearean sonnet or a favourite Shakespearean speech, would be a great example of something that is completely copyright free. If you have a preference for that, perhaps it's not something that's necessary in a newsletter. And if that's not a thing, let me know and we'll just get rid of doing that. So we'll figure it out as we go. The piece I've chosen today is a piece of poetry. It's a piece of wartime poetry. It's not Siegfried Sassoon or Wilfred Owen. In fact, it's not a war poem that I knew at all, apart from one verse of, which I'm sure all of you will recognize when it comes around. The reason for choosing it, simply because we were seeing some friends up in Caen in northern France, just before the 6th of June preparations for, I was going to say celebrations, but remembrance, I think, is probably the more appropriate term. And we drove across Pegasus Bridge, and we saw lots of enthusiasts with their military restored vehicles preparing for all the ceremonies that were going to happen. And that got me thinking back to wartime poetry. Specifically, back when I used to be an actor. Obviously, you're not acting all the time, and my go-to job was supply teaching. So I would stand in for teachers who weren't available and be paid for that. And I got a class of, I think they were 15-year-olds, because they were studying for their GCSEs and doing war poetry. And they'd spent so long analysing the poetry that they really weren't interested. And so I said, has anybody ever actually sat and read and listened to this and allowed it to affect them instead of just breaking it down into, what's the verse? Why have they chosen this imagery? That kind of academicization of war poetry. And so I threw away, very naughty actually, I threw away the particular lesson plan for that day. I said, put your books down and we will read some out loud and allow it to affect us in whatever way it does. Stop thinking about these things academically and start thinking about them as art. So they put their books down, and I read some of the poetry to them. And it completely changed the feeling in the room. And for some of the students who spoke with me afterwards, it completely changed the way they felt about the subject that they were learning about, and war poetry in particular. because studying something academically is much, much different to allowing the imagery to affect oneself. Um, there were tears from a few students. There was engagement and understanding. And while I'm terribly sorry to the teacher whose lesson plan I threw away and did something else, I think sometimes it's worth doing something differently. Now, obviously, in an audio narration newsletter, it's a difficult thing to attack. Um, something from Owen or Siegfried Sassoon, they can be, let's say, not uplifting in any way. And that's entirely understandable given where the war poems, you know, where they were and when they were written. But I did find one that I didn't know apart from one verse in the middle. And I'd like to read that for you as this little section of uh, the newsletter that is reading a piece of text. So, this is For the Fallen by Lawrence Binyon. With proud thanksgiving, a mother for her children, England mourns for her dead across the sea. Flesh of her flesh they were, spirit of her spirit, fallen in the cause of the free. Solemn the drums thrill, death, august and royal, sings sorrow up into immortal spheres. There is music in the midst of desolation and a glory that shines upon our tears. They went with songs to the battle. They were young, straight of limb, true of eye, steady and aglow. They were staunch to the end against odds uncounted. They fell with their faces to the foe. They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. They mingle not with their laughing comrades again. They sit no more at familiar tables of home. They have no lot in our labour of the daytime. They sleep beyond England's foam. But where our desires are and our hopes profound, felt as a wellspring that is hidden from sight, to the innermost heart of their own land they are known as the stars are known to the night. As the stars that shall be bright when we are dust, moving in marches upon the heavenly plain, as the stars that are starry in the time of our darkness, to the end, they remain. I realise that's a bit heavy for a newsletter, but it occurred to me, and I felt it important that I find a way of communicating some of the sense of what that felt like driving over Pegasus Bridge and being in what was a very important place at a very important time. Having said that, moving on then to reflections from the last email that went out. Since that last email about mine and Lizzie's journey into full-time narration and for her full-time editing, we've had a few responses asking about, well, how did you make that initial step to have the confidence to embrace the opportunity to change and to jump without a safety net, not quite knowing where you're going to land. The journey for that started in 2016. We were living in a place called Hitchin, which is a beautiful market town north of London. And it was my wife's birthday, 2016, and I was looking for a present for her because work at that time for her was exceptionally stressful. I find I don't have the words to explain how overstressed she was. It was a civil service job, but with an exceptionally high stress level. And she couldn't wrap her head around, well, can we look for something else? Can we choose something else? And we talked about it a little, and we'd come up with this plan, which was, we called it at the time Out by 50. We were in our early 40s. We would like to be not in, big, big quotes, the system. By 50, we'd rather be doing something that we enjoyed, particularly Liz. I was an actor at the time. I enjoyed my job, but, you don't necessarily enjoy the resting jobs that you do. Anyway, I went into the Waterstones in Hitchin Town Square, and I said to one of the booksellers, this is the problem. I'm looking for a book that would maybe help my wife realize that safety in a government job isn't necessarily the only thing, and we could be whatever we wanted to be, but we don't know how to make that happen. And the bookseller sort of smiled at me and took me towards the back of the shop and went to, I believe it was the self-help section, and pulled a book out which was called Escape Everything by a chap called Robert Ringham. And I had a quick flip through, sat down on the floor and had a quick flip through, and suddenly realized that this was the book that she needed for her birthday. But it was also the book that we needed to change our concept of what was and wasn't possible in our lives, what we might be able to do if we just realized what was and wasn't possible, and what could be if we were prepared to see through a different lens the way the world works. Anyway, long story short, I bought her the book. We both read it, and not too long after having read the book, her opportunity for redundancy came up, and she didn't even phone me to talk to me about it, because we already knew what we thought and what we wanted. And so she just came home one day and said, I got offered redundancy today, so I've signed the papers. Brilliant. So it literally, reading this one book, opened a door to us that we had the opportunity to walk through if we were brave enough. That particular book, Escape Everything, I follow Robert Ringham on his newsletter. It's Robert Ringham, WR for the Ringham. And by pure chance, there's a 10-year anniversary special paperback re-release of the book. So I chatted to Liz, and we both were of the opinion that a way of paying Robert back for that would be to put that book into audio for him without charging him anything. So we'll be doing that as what we call a royalty share. So from any sales, any monies that come to Robert from the audio of that would be divided between us. And that means that Robert wouldn't have to come up with any of the cash up front. So that means that he can still concentrate on working as little as possible and having as great a time as possible. And it was a way for us to pay him back for showing us the escape door. And if we don't make any money out of it, we don't make any money out of it. What it does, we both realize, is complete this circle where we're able to pay back something to the person that put something out into the world, to maybe give them the opportunity of thinking in a different way so that they could escape the trap that they don't know they're in and start to move towards a life that's much more what they might want. I'll tell you all about that later when we get closer to recording, because I've got a massive recording queue at the moment. If you can't wait that long and you really fancy it, at the end of this newsletter, I'll put a link to Robert's website where you can actually buy direct from him, and that's just for the print book, and obviously he gets paid better that way. And then I'll mention it again when we get around to having the time in the audiobook recording queue to actually record the book. But I do encourage you, if you are not happy and you don't think you have any options, you do. And Robert Ringham's book, Escape Everything, will absolutely change the way you see the things that you think are immutable about the way the world works in terms of work. So yes, that's the sort of professional roundup as well. Home life here, as I'm narrating this, it's 42 degrees where we are, and the whole world is melting. I may or may not be recording this wearing nothing but a pair of Speedos and a smile. Depending on who you are, that's either a wonderful thought or an absolutely terrible thought. I'm afraid I can't help you with that. It's one or the other, so I'll just leave that with you in your head somewhere. Try not to think too hard about it. The chickens are laying. We are getting 3 to 5 eggs a day, so they're all laying. And they're starting to develop their own characters. Either that or we're starting to be able to see the difference in characters between them. They're very, very similar, but Liz spends a lot of time making sure that they're being kept in really good conditions. The eggs are wonderful, and there's something almost smug, I think, about eating, like sort of doing a scrambled eggs from eggs that just came out of your chickens in your garden. I never thought for a moment in my 20s, my 30s, or even my 40s that I would be keeping chickens and enjoying it. It's very, very strange. Very strange. This weekend I'm off to Shimmer, which is an romance author event where fans can come and meet their favourite authors of gay romance. I'll be turning up with the delightful C.F. White, though other authors I have worked with will be there also. So if you find yourself wanting to go and meet some authors in the genre of romance, please do come along. Link will be at the bottom after the email for Shimmer. Pop over and say hi. Why not? It's going to be a very interesting event. I believe I am doing a reading at the evening event as well. So we'll see how that goes, how early or late in the evening it is, and how many pints or not of cider I have consumed. Apart from that, just feedback, really. If you have any thoughts about this kind of newsletter or this experiment that we're trying about how does a narrator have a newsletter, or could you do this with your newsletter, if you really enjoy the all audio format, or if you prefer the previous formats where there were a couple of tabs where you could click on what audio you wanted to listen to, and some of the daily events were written. There will be, obviously, I'll try and get the obligatory picture of one of the dogs for you up as well, because who doesn't love a pickle? Other than that, it's the end of this particular newsletter. Look forward to hearing from you soon. If you've anything you'd like to say, anything you'd like to know, or any thoughts you have, just hit reply to this email and you'll get straight to me. Hope you all have a wonderful month. This is me, Rafe Beckley, and Piers Ryman, signing off. Speak to you soon. Goodbye.